I still remember the way the December air felt that night, damp, heavy, clinging to my coat as I pulled into the driveway. Christmas in Seattle usually meant lights everywhere, neighbors' houses glowing, music leaking from windows. But my parents' place? It was dark. No wreath on the door, no warm glow from the living room, just silence. I carried my bag up the steps, a little out of breath from the cold. You know that feeling when you're excited to go home, thinking of hot cocoa, of laughter, of the smell of cinnamon in the kitchen? That was me. My chest was full of it. But the moment I pushed the door open, that feeling collapsed like glass shattering. The house was empty. No voices, no Christmas tree, no wrapping paper mess like every other year. Just the hollow sound of my shoes on the hardwood. And then I saw her, my great-grandmother Agnes, sitting alone at the dining table. The overhead light hummed. She was eating cold leftovers straight from a plastic container, hunched over, a cardigan pulled tight around her thin frame. Her fork scraped the plastic with a sound that made my stomach twist. "Grandma?" My voice cracked in the silence. She looked up, eyes soft but tired, as if she'd been waiting for me. And that's when I noticed the paper. A single sheet of notebook paper taped crookedly to the fridge, black ink in my father's handwriting. I stepped closer, my breath fogging in the chill of the unheated house. It read, "Claire, we used your loan money. Don't worry, we'll pay you back. We needed this vacation. Merry Christmas." My loan money, $9,900. The tuition I needed for next semester. I swear the floor tilted under me. You think you know betrayal when a friend doesn't call back, or when someone breaks a promise. But what about when it's your own family? What would you do if your family stole your future? I could feel the heat rushing to my face, but my hands were ice cold. My mind spun. I pictured my parents on a cruise ship deck, holding cocktails, smiling at sunsets, while I stood in this dark kitchen with bills stacked on my desk back at school. The contrast made me sick. I turned back to Agnes. She set the fork down slowly. "They left yesterday," she said softly. Her voice trembled. "They didn't even ask me to come, just left me here." Her words cracked something in me, because it wasn't just about money. It was about abandonment, about being invisible to the very people you've given everything to. I walked through the house, desperate for any sign that this was some misunderstanding. No stockings, no tree, no half-wrapped gifts. Just silence, the kind that presses on your ears until you want to scream. I stood in the living room, staring at the empty space where the tree usually stood. Year after year, that corner was where we laughed, where I played piano while everyone sang off key. Now, it was just shadows. "Grandma," I whispered, "how could they do this?" She just shook her head, a tear sliding down her cheek. I sat down across from her, staring at the cold leftovers on her plate. They weren't even hers. They were mine, I realized. I had packed that lasagna in my freezer weeks ago. She must have reheated it once, and now was eating it cold. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't about Christmas anymore. It wasn't about one ruined night. It was about the pattern, the way I had let them borrow, take, promise, and never return. And now it had grown into something I couldn't ignore. I reached for the note again, crumpled it in my fist. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every broken trust. I looked straight at Agnes. "I can't let this go." She nodded, eyes fierce despite her age. "And you won't." The silence after that was different. Not empty anymore. Charged. Like the beginning of a storm. I wish I could tell you I still felt like it was Christmas Eve. But standing in that dark house, with a wrinkled note in my hand and my future dangling by a thread, I knew this wasn't just about holidays or family drama. This was about survival. And maybe, finally, it was about drawing a line. I didn't sleep that first night, not even 10 minutes. The house creaked like it was breathing, settling, reminding me with every sound that I wasn't dreaming. I lay on the couch instead of my old bed because the living room let me see everything at once. The front door, the blank corner where the tree should be, the kitchen light that kept stuttering in the vent hood, a tired heartbeat. Agnes was in the guest room down the hall. I could hear her soft, steady snore. It made the emptiness feel less cruel. I kept my coat on. I kept my boots by the couch. I held my phone in my hand like a lifeline and scrolled through photos that should have been comforting. Me in scrubs after a finals week all-nighter, me with coffee, me with that stupid paper hat from last year's Christmas dinner. The pictures didn't help. Each one was a postcard from a version of me who still believed home was safe. I wanted to hate them, I really did. But anger had to swim through a thick river to reach me. Before anger came memory, and memory is sneaky. It doesn't knock. It turns the doorknob and steps inside like it pays rent. When I was 16, I worked at a bakery on weekends. The kind of place that smelled like butter from the sidewalk. I stacked croissants into pyramids and dusted everything with sugar until it looked like fresh snow. Every shift, I wrote numbers in a small blue notebook, tips, hours, goals. I had a plan. A used laptop by August, paid for in cash, no loans, no help. I showed Dad the notebook one Sunday afternoon, proud. He flipped through it, smiling too big, the way he does when he's already decided something. "You're disciplined," he said. "I'm proud." 2 days later, he sat at the dining table with me and explained an opportunity. A friend had a stock tip. It was small, low risk, huge upside. He said words like learning moment, seed money, trust. He promised to pay me back with interest. He promised this would be our thing. A father-daughter investment story we'd tell at graduation. I signed the check. I didn't see the money again. The laptop? I bought it on a payment plan that ate 3 months of tips. The story we told at graduation was different. It was about how proud he was of my grit. He didn't mention the check, neither did I. I laughed when he laughed. I clapped when he clapped. You swallow a stone, and eventually your stomach pretends it's bread. There was the car, too. Freshman year, I found a 2006 Corolla with more personality than paint. It had a door ding the size of Idaho and a cassette deck that clicked every 10 minutes like it was clearing its throat, but it ran. I loved it. Dad borrowed it for a week because my alternator's acting funny and I've got meetings. He returned it with a rattle that sounded like loose bolts in a tin can. The shop called me from the lift. "Transmission's going. Drive it gently or don't drive it." He said he'd split the cost. He didn't. I learned how to take the bus at 5 a.m. Under a sodium streetlight that made the world look like an old photo. Then the textbooks. Always the textbooks. "We're short this month," Mom would say, pinching the bridge of her nose like the headache was a moral defense. "Can we use your card for groceries? Just until Friday?" Friday came, then another Friday. The bill came to me. The groceries were long gone, the late fee stayed. You're listening right now, and maybe you're thinking, why didn't you say no? Why didn't you lock the blue notebook? Why didn't you hide the keys? I ask myself the same thing. Have you ever trusted someone and paid the price? That's the pattern. It doesn't announce itself as theft. It dresses up like love. It wears words like family and we and together, and it taps you on the shoulder when you're tired. It tells you you're kind. It tells you you're strong. It turns your best traits into handles it can pull. I padded into the kitchen at 3 a.m. and poured a glass of water. The faucet sputtered like it had something to say. The fridge hummed. The paper on the door was gone. I'd folded it into my pocket the way a museum guard would handle a relic. Careful, guilty, protective of a thing I hated. On the counter, there was a list written in Mom's looping hand. Not a to-do list, a done list. Booked parking, printed boarding passes, packed sunscreen, notified mail hold, Each line was a pin in a map of their joy. Each line was a tiny confession. They had time to plan everything but a conversation with me. I smelled the lasagna from earlier. Tomato and garlic, but dull, flat, a smell that begged for heat. I ate 2 cold bites. They landed heavy. Agnes shuffled out, her slippers whispering. She wrapped a robe around her like a small fort. "You should try to sleep," she said. I tried. She nodded. Her hair was loose, silver and soft. "When your grandfather died," she said, "I couldn't sleep either." I kept getting up to check if the house still existed. She smiled at the absurdity, at the truth inside it. "It hurts worse at night." We sat like that, 2 women at a kitchen table under a tired light, not saying anything useful, because sometimes there isn't anything useful to say. But memories kept walking in. Senior year of high school, I got a scholarship letter. Confetti in my chest, a fist of relief unclenching. Mom read it out loud in the living room. She cried happy tears. Then she said, "This will help all of us." She meant the gap between scholarship and reality. She meant car insurance and copays and the cable bill no one admitted we didn't need. I nodded because I believed everything was one organism and my joy was our oxygen. By November, that oxygen thinned. I picked up a campus job shelving books in the law library. I liked how the stacks smelled like dust and paper and ambition. I liked how quiet it was to dream there. The thing about patterns is they don't stay small. They expand to fill the container you give them. A loan becomes a habit becomes a rule becomes a story the family tells about you. She's the responsible one. What a pretty story. What a dangerous one. I could count other moments. The holiday when a borrowed credit card turned into concert tickets. The birthday when Dad forgot his wallet at the steakhouse and slapped my shoulder like a teammate when I paid. The time they asked me to co-sign a furniture set because it'll build your credit. It built something else. It built a quiet ache behind my ribs that never quite went away. Outside, the street was wet and black, reflecting the porch light like a long, cold river. A wind chime on the neighbor's porch kept clinking out of rhythm, a little maddening song that wouldn't stop. I stood at the window and watched a cat cross the yard with the confidence of a creature that owes no one anything. I envied it. Back on the couch, I opened my notes app and wrote 1 line. This isn't the first time. Staring at those 4 words, I felt both shame and relief. Shame that it took a note on a fridge to make me admit it. Relief that I finally had a sentence that fit. I've heard people talk about boundaries like they're fences you put up around a garden. I used to hate that image. It felt mean. Gardens should be shared. Flowers are for everyone. But what if someone keeps stomping your seedlings? What if they take your watering can when you need it most? Maybe the fence isn't against people. Maybe it's for the garden. Maybe it's for the fruit that hasn't grown yet. Around 6, the sky softened from black to a washed-out gray. Agnes made coffee in the old percolator. It gurgled and hissed like a tiny engine trying to leave the launch pad. She set a mug in front of me with 2 sugar packets and no questions. That's how you love someone in a kitchen at dawn. You give them caffeine and silence. "Do you remember the ornament with the little courthouse?" she asked after a while, voice tentative, like we were easing the day into motion. "From Pike Place," I said. "The clay one." "You were 8, she smiled, eyes glassy. "You said, 'I want to help people when big people are unfair,'" she tapped the table. "You always had a sense of fairness, even when it hurt. The coffee was strong. It made the back of my tongue tingle." "Fairness is expensive," I said, half joking, half bleeding. "It's invaluable," she corrected, with that stubborn Agnes certainty. She reached across and held my hand. Her palm was warm. The skin paper thin but firm, like a page that's been turned 1,000 times and never torn. "And it's time you stop paying for other people's lessons." My phone buzzed on the table. A notification from Mom's social media, a video this time, steel blue ocean, a ship horn. Her face, sunlit, laughing. The caption, "Finally taking care of ourselves. We deserve it. We deserve it." I felt the words hit me like hail. I stood up too fast. The chair scraped. My breath went shallow. Agnes looked at me. "Breathe, Claire." I did. In through my nose. Out through my mouth I counted 5, 5, 5. My chest loosened. "I'm telling you this because maybe you'll need that trick too. Maybe you'll stand in a kitchen one day with a screen showing you your own erasure, and you'll need your body to remember you exist." I put the phone face down. "I have to stop pretending this is new," I said. "I have to stop calling it a misunderstanding. It's a choice." Agnes nodded. "It is." Something shifted then. Not a decision, not a plan, not yet, but an admission. A broom clearing space on the floor so something else could be placed there. I walked to the dining room and opened the hutch with the glass doors. Inside sat the old family albums, the heavy ones with glued corners and captions in blue ink. I slid one out. Senior year, scholarships. A photo of me holding that confetti letter, cheeks pink, eyes wild with relief. Dad's arm around my shoulders. Mom's hand under my chin. Our smiles matched. It hurt to look at. It also helped. You can love a picture and still change the frame. I closed the album and returned it to the shelf. The house groaned again, the long sound of wood remembering how to hold itself up. I looked around the room and felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Anger without apology. Not the kind that throws things. The kind that clarifies. The kind that says, enough. If you're still with me, if you've listened this far, I want to ask you something simple and hard. Have you ever trusted someone and paid the price? If you have, you know this ache. You know the way it gets into your bones. You also know what happens when you finally name it. The air gets thinner but cleaner. You can breathe again. I took a long sip of coffee. It scalded my tongue, and I welcomed the sting. I'm awake now, I thought, wide awake. And for the first time, the word didn't scare me. If this hits home, tell me how you learned to say no. Your story might be the thing that helps someone else breathe. Morning arrived like a clean sheet of paper. Not bright, not merry, Seattle gray, but blank enough to write on. I stood at the sink with a mug warming my hands, watching the steam curl like question marks. Panic or plan? Pick one. Agnes shuffled in wearing her wool slippers and a cardigan buttoned wrong, second to fourth, as if her hands had been thinking faster than her eyes. She fixed the buttons without comment and studied me with that sharp, grandmotherly radar that doesn't miss much. "Are you ready to do something about it?" she asked. No pity in her voice, just a doorway. "Yes," I said. The word felt like a match striking. We cleared the table. Out went the cold containers and the note I'd folded and unfolded until it went soft at the creases. Agnes wiped the wood with slow, deliberate strokes, like resetting an altar. Then she set down a yellow legal pad, a pen, and my laptop. She placed her reading glasses on the bridge of her nose with a tiny click that sounded like the start of a trial. "First rule," she said. "No improvising. We make a plan. We follow the plan." My chest loosened. I know how to plan. I live in outlines and case briefs and color-coded tabs. I opened a fresh document and typed a title before I could talk myself out of it. Operation Boundaries. We made 3 columns: financial, legal, logistics. Agnes tapped each header with her pen like a gavel. I started listing facts, dates, amounts, transfer numbers, screenshots to attach later. Agnes dictated from memory, flight times she'd overheard, brand names on the luggage tags, the way Mom had said, mail hold, as if she were proud of the neatness of it. I pulled up my bank portal and took screenshots of the withdrawal. There it was, $9,900. Gone in a single clean slice. The number sat on the screen like a bruise. I copied the page into a folder labeled Evidence, then mirrored the folder to a cloud drive and a thumb drive, belt and suspenders. Next, Agnes said, "Control the house." "Change the locks?" I asked. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. She nodded. If they took the keys and left us behind, they forfeited automatic entry. We decide who comes in? The decision didn't feel vengeful, it felt like oxygen. I Googled a locksmith with emergency service and read reviews out loud until we found a name that made Agnes nod. I called. My voice steadied with every word. Yes, today. Yes, all exterior doors. Yes, a keypad with a temporary code, double quote. We moved through the house with our legal pad, Agnes in front, me behind, like a slow parade reclaiming territory. We photographed every room from the doorway, wide shots, then details. The undecorated mantel, the stack of unpaid bills, the mail held with a rubber band. The camera shutter clicked, steady as a metronome. In the office, we found a neat pile of cruise brochures, a boarding pass stub, 2 tiny bottles of sunscreen. I bagged them like evidence, because that's what they were. "Smell that?" Agnes asked. I frowned. "What?" "The smell of a plan," she said, and surprised us both by laughing. The sound startled a bird from the cedar outside. The locksmith arrived before noon, a compact woman with a tool belt that looked like it had seen a war. She introduced herself, Marta, and wiped her boots on the mat without being asked. She listened without judgment as I explained. "Families," she said, like a diagnosis, and got to work. The drill word, metal clinked. She replaced dead bolts with crisp, heavy ones and installed a keypad on the front door. She showed me how to set a temporary code. I typed 4 numbers that meant something only to me. The beep felt like a small crown placed on my head. As Marta worked, I called the utilities listed on the counter. I asked about balances, due dates, late fees. I took notes. The numbers stacked into a column that was both maddening and clarifying. Money had been left to rot while vacations were planned. Not anymore. I scheduled payments for essential bills, then added those amounts to a family debt tab in the spreadsheet. If I covered it today, it would be documented, with receipts due back with interest. Agnes called a friend while I typed. "Marjorie, dear," she said into the phone, voice sweet and steel. "We require your legal brain." She listened, nodded, and handed the phone to me. "Claire, this is Marjorie," the voice said, warm, precise, efficient. "I'm retired, not dead." "Walk me through what you have." I did. She interrupted with pointed questions that made me better. "You'll draft a repayment agreement," she said. Plain language. Total amount owed, interest at a modest rate, repayment schedule, consequences for default. Add a clause about monitoring and reporting. No threats, just facts. "Can we do that without going straight to court?" I asked. "Of course." "You'll offer them a bridge back to decency," she said. "But you'll build it out of steel." When I hung up, Agnes had already lined up pens. We drafted. We argued about a comma. We chose clarity over flourish. The agreement grew into a document that looked, to my eye, like a spine. It could hold weight, pattern interrupt. You ready? Stop, breathe, decide. I did something I'd never done before. I wrote a script for myself, 2 pages, bullet points. Phrases that I could say even when my hands were shaking. I hear you. Here are the facts. This is not about love. This is about a boundary. I will not discuss feelings until the agreement is signed. Would it sound robotic? Maybe, but panic loves improvisation. Boundaries love sentences you can stand on. At 2, Marta finished the last lock and demonstrated the emergency key. She left a card and a kind smile. "Don't give them the code," she said softly, "until you get what you need." I nodded, grateful for the solidarity of practical women. We ate grilled cheese standing at the counter. Butter hissed in the pan. The kitchen smelled like childhood, but gentler. Agnes cut the sandwiches diagonally because some things should still be kind. She talked about my great-grandfather's stubbornness and how she used to think stubborn meant rude. Turns out, she said, it can mean faithful too. Faithful to a line you've drawn. After lunch, we called the bank where the transfer originated. I gave dates, amounts, and requested a transaction report. The representative's voice slid into that professional register people use when something bad has clearly happened. "I'm flagging this," she said. "I'll email you documentation." I thanked her with a sincerity that surprised me. Small helps felt like warm hands on my back, steadying me forward. Then we gathered the things that mattered. Birth certificates, the deed to the house, heirloom jewelry, a worn velvet box containing a ring with a story longer than I am old. We put them in a safe Agnes kept under the bed, then moved the safe to a place no one would think to look. When you've been prey, defense starts to feel like prayer. All afternoon, we rehearsed. Agnes took turns playing my father's bluster and my mother's tremble. She rolled her eyes like my brother. She sighed like my sister. She was a one-woman theater of every button I'd ever had installed. "Let me in the house right now," she barked, channeling Dad. I met her eyes. "We'll talk at the coffee shop, after you read and signed the agreement." "You do this to your own family?" she whispered, now Mom, lower lip shaking. "I'm doing this for our family," I said, steady, "so we can stop harming each other." We went again and again, until the lines weren't lines anymore, but muscle memory, until I could feel the floor in my feet even when the room tilted. Around 4, the light outside thinned to pearl. I set the temporary code and wrote it on a sticky note I did not intend to use. I slid the repayment agreement into a manila folder with tabs, evidence, terms, consequences. I printed 2 copies because paper has a way of making decisions feel legitimate. Agnes brewed tea and set a lemon slice in each cup. "We are not here to punish," she said, her fingers cupped around the porcelain. "We are here to change the weather." "What if they laugh?" I asked. "Then we keep our coats on," she said, "and keep the door closed." The house sounded different to me by evening. Same walls, same floors, but less echo. There was furniture in the silence now, lists, locks, language. A plan is a kind of furnishing. It fills the room with purpose. I walked to the front door and pressed my fingers to the brand new keypad. Cool metal, a clean square. I watched the porch, the street, the fir tree that shook its needles in the wind. I imagined my parents' faces when their keys didn't work. I imagined my voice not rising, not breaking, calm, firm. No apology for drawing a line where a cliff had opened. You might be wondering if it felt ruthless. It didn't. It felt like stitching a wound. It stings. It's necessary. You do it so the body remembers how to hold itself together. Before bed, I opened the document one more time and read the title out loud, just for me. Operation Boundaries. The words sounded less like a threat and more like a promise. To myself, to Agnes, maybe even to my parents if they chose to hear it that way. I set the folder by the door. I charged my phone. I turned off the kitchen light and let the dark gather, not as an enemy, but as a curtain before a play. The audience, if you were listening, I'd tell you this. Plans are not cold. Plans are warm in a different way. They are blankets with edges, tucked in tight so the night can't steal your heat. And if you've ever been where I am, if you've had to write a boundary you were taught never to write, tell me how you found the words. Someone reading the comments might need your sentence to start their own. Snow began as a rumor, thin flakes that couldn't decide if they were rain. By late afternoon, the sky turned the color of pewter, and the street lamps flicked on early, little halos in the gray. Agnes stood beside me at the front window, her hand light on my forearm. The keypad's new numbers glowed a soft blue by the door. My folder sat on the console table. Agreement, evidence, consequences. Everything in its tab, everything ready. Headlights swung into the driveway and slid up the living room ceiling like a film reel. Doors thumped. Luggage wheels rattled, voices, laughter. I felt my pulse jump, then count itself down, 5 in, 5 out, again. The doorbell rang. Long, cheerful, oblivious. I didn't open. I pressed the intercom button instead. Hi. My voice sounded calm, like a receptionist, like a woman whose house was not a stage. Before anyone comes in, we need to talk. There was a beat, the kind where you can hear people glance at one another. Then Dad's voice, extra bright, salesman bright. Claire! Open up, kiddo, we're frozen solid out here. The doorknob jiggled, the lock held. I watched him try the key. He frowned at the keypad like it had insulted him. Your keys won't work, I said. Not yet. What? He snapped. The voice changed, brightness gone. You changed the locks? On your own family? I changed the locks on a house you left, I said. We'll unlock it when we've handled what you did. Mom's voice slid in, sugar melting. Honey, don't be dramatic. Let's get inside, warm up, and we'll sort everything out like adults. Adults! I looked at Agnes. She made a tiny go-on motion with her chin. I kept mine level. We're going to sort it out here, through the camera, or at the coffee shop on 45th, your choice. My brother's whisper carried through the speaker. This is insane. My sister shushed him, but not convincingly. Neighbor movement snagged my eye. Mrs. Patel across the street had paused with her recycling bin, mittened hands holding a cereal box like a prop. The Henderson kids' faces pressed to their window, 3 white ovals in the dusk. Social proof, whether I wanted it or not. The street was watching. Clara Dad again. Open the door. The old authority. The kind that used to flip a switch in me. The one labeled obey. It didn't flip. Here are the facts, I said, sticking to the script I'd written with Agnes at our scrubbed table. $9,900 were taken from my account without permission. That was my tuition. There's a repayment agreement waiting for you to read and sign. After that, we'll discuss entry and next steps. Don't talk to me like a stranger, he said. I'm talking to you like a person who took my money, I answered. Choose, porch or coffee shop. Silence, whispering. A suitcase zipper rasped like a saw. Snow ticked harder against the storm door. Finally, Mom's voice. Coffee shop. The word held the shape of embarrassment. She could feel the eyes. 15 minutes, I said. Bring your IDS. Agnes squeezed my arm, then reached for her coat. I'll call Marjorie, she said. She'll meet us there. We walked the 3 blocks with our collars up, breath ghosting out ahead of us. The coffee shop's bell jingled as we entered. The air smelled like citrus cleaner and espresso. Warmth pressed my face and made my eyes smart. Agnes guided us to a corner table far from the register. I set the folder down and placed a pen on top. 2 cups steamed between us. Hers tea, mine black coffee. I didn't touch mine. I wanted my hands free. They came in a gust of cold and bright luggage, sunburnt faces, cruise ship tans in a Seattle winter. It would have been funny if it hadn't been mine. Mom's hair was beachy, her coat open. Dad's polo looked absurd in December. My brother's hoodie said, Vibes. My sister's tote bag said nothing. They spotted us. The room seemed to lean. Dad pulled his chair out hard enough to scrape. What is this circus? He said under his breath. It's a conversation, I said. Please sit. Marjorie arrived within a minute, as if she'd been standing just outside timing her entrance. Small, silver-haired, boots like armor. She set a leather folio on the table and nodded at Agnes, then at me. I'm here as a friend, she said, voice civilized and edged. And a witness. Dad blinked at her. We don't need a lawyer. You need accountability, I said. This helps. I opened the folder. The document looked almost gentle. Clean margins, numbered clauses. I slid a copy to each of them. This acknowledges the amount taken, sets a schedule to repay, includes interest low enough to be merciful but high enough to be real. It outlines what happens if you miss payments. It also covers house access and the new security code contingent on good faith steps. Mom didn't look down. She looked at me. Honey, we were always going to pay you back. She put a hand on her chest like a pledge. We just wanted to surprise you with a family trip first. We deserve a little joy, too. Joy shouldn't come out of my degree, I said, keeping my voice flat. Please read the agreement. My brother skimmed the first paragraph and snorted. Interest? On family? Family doesn't empty accounts without asking, I said. He sank back, cheeks flushing under his tan. My sister read, eyes flicking quickly, the way she always did when she pretended to be slower than she was to avoid work. When she got to the schedule, her mouth moved as if counting privately. She didn't look up. Dad shoved the papers away. This is insulting. This is boring, I said softly. And that's the point. No drama, just numbers, misses. Patel walked past the window with her dog, did an obvious double take, and kept walking very, very slowly. Pattern interrupt in real time. A neighbor with a front row seat, I didn't hide it. I let the embarrassment sit with them. Let it do a little work. Okay, Mom said finally, thin smile. What if we sign your little paper and you let us into our house, and then we talk about the rest? I met her eyes. We'll let you in after the first payment clears today. You have flight refunds pending, yes? The tiniest flinch crossed her face. Dad shot her a look like a tripwire he hadn't seen. Marjorie adjusted her glasses. Airline refunds post within hours, she said pleasantly. We can wait. We're not transferring anything in a coffee shop, Dad said. Then we can go to your bank, I said. Or we can go nowhere and you can get a hotel, your call. The barista set a plate of cookies on the counter and announced, free samples, like we were not negotiating the soul of a family in the corner. A kid in a beanie grabbed two and left crumbs on his jacket. Life went on, impolite, unbothered. Mom picked up a pen, set it down, picked it up again. You're really doing this, she said. At Christmas. I'm really doing this, I said. For Christmases that come after. Dad leaned in, elbows on the table, voice low. Claire. We gave you everything. Memories flashed. Blue notebook, bus stops, steakhouse checks. I let them pass without catching. I'm not taking inventory today, I said. I'm setting terms. Agnes's hand found mine under the table, a quick squeeze, then gone. Marjorie turned a page. The sound was delicate and brutal at once. My sister cleared her throat. Everyone looked at her as if surprised she could make a sound. We should sign, she said. It's reasonable, Dad glared. Whose side are you on? The side that keeps us from being homeless tonight, she said, and from breaking her for good. Her eyes flicked to me and softened, then steadied. Silence again. The kind that sifts all the excuses out and leaves you with pebbles of truth. I tapped the signature line. Your names go here, I said. Today's date. Initial next to the clause about the code, quote, Mom signed first. Of course she did. Her signature looked like cursive that had been to a party. Dad stared at the pen like it was a snake. He took it, scrawled something that suggested reluctance as an art form, and shoved the paper back. My brother scribbled with a sigh. My sister printed carefully, as if neatness could be a kindness. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Thank you to the part of them that still recognized reality. My heart thudded once, twice. I didn't let it celebrate yet. Marjorie slid the papers into her folio and produced a compact square reader. Refunds, she said, almost cheerful. Let's process the first transfer. We don't have, Dad began, but Mom was already unlocking her phone. Her hands trembled. She navigated to the airline app. The tiny circle spun, then revealed a number, the credit due. She swallowed. It'll cover the first 2 months, she said. Great, I said. We'll start there. The transfer hummed through, electrons doing their invisible, miraculous job. My phone buzzed a second later. Deposit received. It wasn't all. It was enough to open the door. I exhaled for the first time in an hour. Agnes put her tea bag on its saucer with the grace of a queen laying down a scepter. "There," she said softly. We bundled up again and walked back in an awkward procession. The snow had turned serious. It stuck to eyebrows, to coat sleeves, to the little line of hair at Dad's temple he pretended didn't exist. We stood on the porch under the dim bulb while our breaths made a temporary fog. I entered the temporary code. The keypad beeped acceptance. I stepped aside, palm open toward the dark hallway. "Welcome home," I said. "There are new rules on the fridge. We'll review them after everyone puts their bags down." Dad paused on the threshold, looked at the keypad, at me, at the street where Mrs. Patel gave a tiny wave she thought was subtle. He didn't wave back. He walked in. The others followed, smaller than when they'd left. Luggage wheels clicked on the entry tile. Inside, the house smelled like itself again. Old wood, heat, the faint ghost of coffee. I placed the new code in my pocket and felt the smoothness of the paper against my fingers. Not victory, not yet, but structure, a spine. I turned to you, to the lens I like to imagine is your listening face, and said, quietly, for anyone who needs to hear it, "You're allowed to make terms. You're allowed to ask for payment before you hand over the keys. If you've ever had to do something like this, tell me how you kept your voice steady. Someone scrolling at 2 a.m. might need your sentence more than sleep." The day after the coffee shop and the signatures, the house felt like it had been exorcised. Not lighter, exactly, just rearranged, like someone had put words back on their proper shelves. Heat clicked through the vents. The fridge light didn't feel accusatory anymore. Agnes hummed when she moved around the kitchen, something old and tuneless and kind. I woke up before dawn and lay still, listening for alarms that didn't exist. No doorbell, no suitcase wheels, no raised voices humming with denial. Just the plumbing's soft throat clear and the faraway hiss of a bus on wet asphalt. The kind of sounds that tell you a city is waking up whether your family does or not. I made coffee and opened my laptop at the dining table. The repayment transfer had landed in my account overnight. It glowed there, sterile and precise. A number that meant one thing only. Class wasn't slipping out of reach this month. It wasn't triumph, just oxygen. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Agnes sat opposite me with tea and a slice of toast she barely touched. The morning light made the steam look like silver ribbon. "How's your chest?" she asked. It was such an Agnes question, direct but aimed at the heart. "Looser," I said. Like someone untied a knot while I wasn't looking. She smiled. "Good. Now we keep it that way." We didn't talk about the meeting, not really. We didn't replay lines or grade performances. We didn't analyze my father's face when the reader chirped. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was hygiene. You don't rub a healing bruise. Instead, we did ordinary things with ceremonial care. We wrote essentials only on a sticky note and put it on the fridge. Heat, water, mortgage, groceries. We added the new schedule to the repayment spreadsheet. We washed 2 mugs and left them to dry in their own small blank space. Agnes unfurled a faded table runner with tiny stitched pines, winter without schmaltz. She pressed a crease flat with her palm, satisfied. Late morning, I drove back to campus. Seattle wore January like a sweater. Low sky, a steady mist that made everything glossy. The law library doors were a comfort, heavy glass that swung with a reliable whoosh. Inside, the air smelled like paper and old carpet, the perfume of ambition. I nodded at Mark from Civil Procedure. He gave me the chin lift we reserve for the specific intimacy of shared statute pain. I found my spot, 3rd table, left side, near the outlet that sometimes sparks, and opened my binder. It's funny how the body remembers what normal feels like, and then drags you there by the wrist, highlighters, sticky tabs. A margin note I could read later like a message from a past self. Argue narrow rule, I'd written in pink. Build out exception. The pen fit my fingers the way it always had. My breath settled into a rhythm that matched the slow flip of pages. Emails trickled in. A professor confirmed our small group rotation for moot court. A clinic coordinator asked for availability. I answered each one with measured sentences. Pruning any apology, I paid a bill. I printed an article. I pretended my hands didn't tremble when I typed my login for the Bursar's portal, because trembling or not, I was paying the amount due done. Between cases, I let my eyes rest on the window. Students in puffy coats moved like pieces on a board, deliberate, hunched against drizzle, complicated in a way only 20-somethings juggling futures can be. A couple argued softly, smiling even as they gestured. A guy in a knit cap danced for no reason at the crosswalk. The ordinary beauty of other people's lives doing what lives do. My phone buzzed once. A text from my sister. Hope you're okay. No punctuation. Neutral. A white flag or a decoy. I stared at it, let the edges of the bubble blur, and put the phone face down. The new rule wasn't a rule unless I treated it like one. I would not process their feelings in real time to protect them from their own choices. We had an agreement. That was the conversation. At noon, Agnes called, not to check up, just to say, I'm going to the farmer's market for oranges. Do you want anything sweet? She meant dessert, but also meant gentleness. Clementines, I said, and the almond cookies from the loud baker. Done, she said. I could hear the smile in her voice, the smile you wear when you pick something out for someone you love and picture their face. I finished a reading on remedies, underlining the part where equity does what law cannot. Sometimes the footnotes say it better than the main text. I copied one into my notebook. A court of conscience must bind what contracts cannot. I thought about our agreement, about its little spine of numbered promises, about the way Marjorie's pen had sounded like a nail tapping a beam. On the way home, the clouds thinned to tissue and the light went pale gold for a full 20 minutes. The neighborhood looked forgiven. I parked, carried in a paper bag of clementines, and found Agnes in the kitchen with music turned low. Billie Holiday, a voice like velvet frayed in the right places. She had bought the cookies. She had wrapped them in wax paper tied with twine like a story you open slowly. We ate at the counter, crumbs stuck to our fingertips. You look less haunted, she told me. Ghosts hate spreadsheets, I said. She snorted, delighted. We kept the afternoon small. I cleaned the stovetop. Agnes wrote 2 cards to friends in looping script that wandered but never got lost. I set a simple centerpiece on the table. 3 candles, a bowl of clementines, the old courthouse ornament on a ribbon looped around a jar. A nod to Christmas without pretending we had one. Every so often, a thought brushed against me like a coat sleeve in a crowded store. This could hold. This could be what holding looks like. I let the thought linger. I didn't clutch it. At dusk, I walked around the block just to move my legs and prove to myself that the world was still there. The air smelled like wet cedar, like sidewalks and timid snow. On the corner, Mrs. Patel's dog wore booties it hated with a passion I respected. Across the street, the Hendersons were stringing a new set of lights that blinked in earnest. A teenage girl in a beanie offered me a fistful of popcorn on the sidewalk and said, "My mom burned the first batch. Do you want the second?" I took a pinch. It tasted like butter and truce. Back inside, the house was warm in a new way. Not overheated, steadied. My father's voice did not roll through walls. My mother's sigh did not float from room to room, collecting guilt. There were no footsteps that made me listen for tone. The absence of threat has a sound. It's the whisper of a page turning without tearing. We ate soup for dinner, soup that had existed before the cruise and would exist after the repayment plan. Lentils, carrots, a bay leaf like a raft. Agnes passed Pepper and told a story about a library fine she'd paid in 1963 with nickels. I laughed at the right places and felt my shoulders climb down from around my ears. After dishes, we worked a puzzle at the table and admired every blue piece that pretended to be sky. When the last edge clicked in, Agnes leaned back and said, "You know the weather will change again." It wasn't a threat. It was a forecast from someone who's buried a few winters. "I know," I said, "but tonight I'm going to let this be enough." She squeezed my hand. Let it. I took a shower long enough to feel my muscles unwind. The bathroom mirror fogged in a soft cloud. I drew a tiny fence in the steam with my fingertip, a rectangle with a gate, then wiped it away before it hardened into a metaphor I'd be stuck with. In bed, I scrolled for a minute and then forced myself to stop. I left one lamp on, read 3 pages of a novel that had nothing to do with law or families or money, only sentences doing their job. Agnes's nightlight cast a small, faithful circle in the hall. If you've ever had a day like this, a day after the storm where everything is both calmer and not quite right, you know the flavor. Relief with a rind of worry. You breathe easier, but you also count. You run your fingers along the edges of new things and check for splinters. You wonder if the line you drew will hold when the wind shifts. I'm not going to lie to you, part of me kept listening. For the ping of a text, for the thunk of mail, for a knock that might be an apology or a new problem shaped like one, but I didn't pace, I didn't rehearse. I let the quiet be quiet. I let the day end without demanding it explain itself. I brushed my teeth. I turned off the last light. I stood in the doorway and watched the dark settle like a blanket someone had warmed by the fire. Then, out loud, just so my own ears could believe me, I said, "It's okay to rest, but peace never lasts." If you've learned how to enjoy the calm without losing your edge, tell me how. Someone might be listening from their own quiet house, counting their own breaths, trying to believe they're allowed to feel safe. The morning started ordinary. That's the cruel part, oatmeal. A clementine peeled in one long curl. Agnes humming something that might have been a hymn or a grocery list. I set my laptop on the table and checked the usual class portal, email, the repayment spreadsheet that finally felt like a leash on chaos. Outside, Seattle looked rinsed and quiet. A pale light. A promise of nothing. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I almost let it go. You know that reflex. If you don't pick up, the world can't change. I answered anyway. "Hello, may I speak with Claire Whitcomb?" The voice was crisp. Polite can cut. "This is Claire." "This is Dana calling from Cascadia Federal. We're reaching out regarding a newly opened personal loan in your name." I wanted to verify a few details. I sat very still. What loan? Her keyboard started clicking, a steady metronome. "A $20,000 personal loan originated yesterday afternoon at our downtown branch. It was like the room tilted 6 degrees, not enough to fall. Enough to feel gravity choose sides." "No," I said. "I didn't apply for anything." "Okay," she said calmly, which told me she had a script for this. "Do you have a moment to review?" Agnes looked up from the sink. I put her on speaker and set the phone between us like a small, dangerous animal. "Yes," I said. She read basics, my full name, last 4 of my social address all correct. My stomach went cold in layers. "I did not sign for that," I said. My voice surprised me, not a whisper, not a scream. A statement you could write on a wall. Dana inhaled slow, the way bank people breathe when they step onto thin ice for you. "Thank you. Let's go step by step. I'll place a hold. First, I'm emailing you the application packet. It includes a copy of the signature we have on file and a branch ID log, a chime. Email landed." I clicked. The subject line felt grotesque. "Welcome to your new loan." I opened the PDF. The screen brightened. White background, boxes with my data, and there it was, a signature. My name, but not my hand. A looped C too big, an L that leaned drunk. A flourish I've never used. "Is that you?" Dana asked. "No." My mouth went dry. "No, it isn't." Agnes leaned closer, glasses low, her breath a soft fog on the screen. "They copied the shape," she murmured. "Not the weight." Dana's voice came back. "I'm initiating a fraud claim. We'll freeze the account and flag the branch visit. It appears the application was processed in person." "In person?" The words scratched on the way out. "Yes," she said. "A teller ID appears." "I'll escalate and ask security to pull footage. You'll receive a confirmation email with the case number in the next hour. Thank you," I said. 2 syllables that felt both too small and exactly right. "While I have you," she continued gently, "I'm also seeing a credit pull from 2 years ago, tied to a store-branded card application in your name. Did you authorize that?" "The room changed temperature." "What store?" she told me. "A chain that sells everything, appliances, furniture, the kind of place that smells like plastic and loud sales." "I've never had a card there," I said. "There's a closed line with a prior balance," she said, typing again. "It shows late payments and a charge-off before it was settled. I looked at Agnes, she looked at me, the house hummed. The oven clicked, though no one had touched it. I could hear my own heartbeat in my mouth. "Dana," I said carefully, "can you send me that history?" "I can," she said. "And Claire?" She softened my name like a bandage. "I know this is a lot. I'm going to walk you through placing a freeze with the 3 credit bureaus and adding multi-factor authentication to your accounts. I'll stay on the line." "Okay," I said. And then I did something small and decisive. I opened notes and wrote, "This is proof, not panic." We went through the motions, password resets, 2-factor locks, fraud alerts. It felt like building a fence while a storm tested each post. Agnes fetched my passport and my student ID when we needed numbers. Her hands didn't shake, mine did. When we hung up, the kitchen was too bright. The PDF sat open like a wound. I zoomed in on the signature until the pixels became squares. My name broke into blocks. It felt like a metaphor I didn't want. Agnes tapped the counter lightly with one knuckle. "Breathe," she said, the way she does when breath is the only tool you can afford. "I thought the agreement was the line," I said. "I thought we were done being surprised." She tilted her head. "Patterns don't quit because you draw a line. They test the fence." "That's how you learn where the posts need anchors," I nodded. "It didn't make it hurt less. It made it legible. There's a difference." My laptop pinged again, another email. Subject, credit notification, a dip in my score. A red bar that felt like a slap. I saw numbers I'd worked hard to grow slide backward by a margin that could cost me interviews, clerkships, internships, trust. I know you get this. How tiny integers can rearrange your future. I put a hand on my chest. It felt like there was glass there. "If this hits my record," I said, "my externship with the clinic could be—" Agnes reached for my hand. "Call them," she said. "Not to confess, to inform. True things are allowed daylight. I called the clinic coordinator. I kept it simple. There's fraudulent activity on my credit. I've filed a claim. If anything pops in a routine check, I want you to know the facts now." She didn't flinch. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Send documentation when you have it. We won't penalize you for something you didn't do." I believed her because her voice carried the weight of a practiced fairness, but I still stood very still after I hung up, letting relief and doubt do their tug-of-war in my ribs. Pattern interrupt. Hear the beat change. My phone lit with a social notification, a photo. My father's hand holding a drink with a tiny umbrella. Yesterday's sun reflecting off the glass. Caption, "Life's short, take the trip." I didn't tap it. I didn't rage comment. I let it pass like a car I don't need to chase. But the image burned. Not because of the drink, Because of the ease, the luxury of acting like money is weather. I clicked back to the PDF. There was a field for primary purpose. Someone had checked home improvement in a neat, confident X. I almost laughed. Of course. What a polite lie. What a tidy story for a teller. Let's print, I said, and make a timeline. Agnes was already walking to the cabinet for paper. We printed the loan packet, the credit report, the email confirmations. I wrote dates on the margins. I drew arrows. I wrote 2 years ago in a circle and underlined it twice. 2 years ago, I was studying cases about fiduciary duty while someone used my name to buy interest-free installments on a couch I never sat on. We sat shoulder to shoulder at the table and compared my legitimate signatures to the counterfeits. I signed my name on a blank sheet 3 times, slow. The real strokes had confidence in odd places. The fakes showed bravado where my line always softened. It's strange how your name can betray and defend you at once. My phone buzzed again. Dana, case number attached, account frozen. Branch manager will call by end of day. Another buzz. An attachment from a bureau. Your initial fraud alert is active for 1 year. The language was dry. I wanted to kiss it. Tell me what this means for your next steps, Agnes said. Her voice didn't try to steer. It drew a map and handed me the pencil. It means the stakes just rose, I said. This isn't about tuition anymore. It's about my name, my record. If a clerkship calls and sees a mess, I won't get to explain it to a voicemail, and I'm not going to crumble. I surprised myself with the speed of that answer. I'm going to document everything. I'm going to keep classes clean. I'm going to make noise where noise helps and stay silent where silence protects. She smiled, approval without applause. Good. We took a break because the mind is a muscle and cramps if you don't treat it like one. I stepped onto the porch. The air smelled like wet pine and distant diesel, city poetry. The sky had brightened an inch. 2 crows argued on the wire, their calls rough, honest. A UPS truck hissed to a stop, sighed, moved on. Ordinary life refused to bow to my drama. It helped. Inside again, Agnes slid a bowl of clementines toward me like an offering. Eat, she said. Vitsy, and also sweet. I peeled one and watched the rind release oil in tiny suns. Do you think they... I didn't finish the sentence. Some questions rot if you say them out loud. I think people do what they're practiced at doing, she said. Until something stops them, or something changes them. Sometimes both. Do you think this will stop them? I think it will stop them here, she said, tapping the table. And I think you can decide where here is. The branch manager called mid-afternoon. Voice brisk, rehearsed, I asked for footage. I asked for a copy of any ID presented. He hedged and then softened when I used words like formal request and fraud affidavit and case number. Law school had given me a language. Boundary had given me a tone. It turns out both matter. By evening, my email held a neat little stack of proofs, screenshots, forms, a PDF I saved twice. I backed everything up, named files like a clerk who believes in tomorrow, loan_fraud_case_001.pdf, credit alert _Experian PDF, timeline _V1 DOCX. Order isn't just tidy. It's a claim you stake in the ground that says, I intend to win this with daylight. I won't pretend I felt brave. I felt furious. And I felt tired in a very old way. The kind of tired that lives in your jaw and makes you unclench on purpose. But courage isn't a feeling. It's a decision you remake every hour. You might be listening and thinking, this is too much for one person. It is. That's why I let people help. Dana helped. The clinic coordinator helped. Agnes helped like oxygen helps. Quiet, constant. If you're choosing a boundary, choose witnesses too. Choose people who love you enough to tell the truth and sit beside you while you print it. As the light went out, the kitchen turned to gold for a minute and then to blue. Agnes lit one candle on the table. Not festive, steady. I looked at the flame and thought of that store card 2 years ago, the invisible hand that lit this fuse long before I found the match. Rage rose and then settled, heavy, useful. I wrote one more line in notes. Name the harm, don't become it. If you've ever opened an email that knocked the floor 3 inches lower and kept breathing anyway, tell me how you steadied yourself. Somebody scrolling in the dark needs your trick tonight. The call from the bank didn't end the day, it bent it. By morning, everything looked the same. Fog on the street, the neighbors' garbage cans lined like chess pieces, but the air had a taste, metallic and thin. Agnes made oatmeal because the body still needs fuel even when your name is in a stranger's filing cabinet. I swallowed 5 spoonfuls, no more. We didn't plan a confrontation. We planned breakfast, then email, then class. But patterns don't send calendar invites. They show up, they bang. It started with the door. A fist, hard and rhythmic. Not the doorbell, knuckles. Agnes looked at me over her glasses. The new lock sat there on the door like calm muscles. I checked the peephole, Dad, jaw set. Shoulders squared as if that would shrink him back into a shape I recognized. Mom behind him in a scarf that tried to look soft. My brother and sister off to the side, pretending to be part of the weather. Open up, Claire, Dad said to the wood, the old tone. Command dressed as care. We need to clear the air. We don't clear the air with lungs that stole my oxygen. I pressed the intercom. We can talk. We will not yell. We will stay in the living room, phones on the table. No raised voices. Just open the door, he said. I just told you the terms, I said. Agree or we meet at the coffee shop. A beat. The kind that used to make me fill the silence with apology. I let it stand. He exhaled. Fine. I opened. The winter air pushed in like an uninvited cousin. Mom crossed the threshold first, eyes scanning, cataloging what might indict her. Her gaze landed on the folder on the console table, evidence, and flinched like she'd touched a burner. Tea? Agnes asked. Her voice had trim at the edges. She pointed at the dining table as if it were a bench in a courtroom. Phones here. Everyone put their phones down except Dad. He stared at his screen like it was a witness he could coach. Agnes cleared her throat without a sound and raised an eyebrow that had cross-examined better men. He placed it face down. I stayed standing. The paper from Cascadia Federal was in my hand. I didn't wave it. I didn't shake it. I held it the way you hold a photograph you'd rather not own. There's a loan in my name, I said. $20,000 opened in person. Here's the application. Here's the signature that is not mine. Mom's mouth opened. Claire, we... Don't, I said gently, and the gentleness surprised me. Please, read first. They passed the paper down the line like a hot plate. My brother skimmed and rolled his eyes as if letters were a personal attack. My sister read slowly, jaw tight. Mom blinked too fast. Dad didn't blink at all. Is this a joke? He said. No, I said. They'll fix it, he said, shrugging. Banks make mistakes. I nodded at Agnes. She slid a second sheet across the table. The email from Dana with the case number, the freeze confirmation, the note about in-person processing, names, timestamps. Dad laughed. It was not a happy sound. Anyone could have walked in with your info? Anyone? I asked. Like who? He spread his hands. Scammers, you read the news. I did, I said. I also read the branch log. They checked ID. They pulled footage. They'll release it with the affidavit. His eyes flashed. There it was. The flinch around the future. A video that might not lie. Claire, Mom said, reaching toward the paper as if petting it could make it purr. We were going to tell you... When? Agnes asked. No tremor, only curiosity sharpened to a point. Mom's hand stalled midair. It was supposed to be temporary, a bridge. Your father hurt his back. We needed a new couch. The old one was... Embarrassing? Agnes supplied. Uncomfortable, Mom said, cheeks coloring, and then the dishwasher died. And Christmas was coming, and we thought that you'd write my name on the line, I said. Again, Dad's chin lifted. It's a family name. No, I said. It's my name. Silence, not the good kind. The kind that gathers charge. You changed the locks, Dad said, as if that were the pivot point of all harm. I changed the terms, I said, and I'm changing them again now. Agnes reached into the folio and set down a new page, short, clean, a notice of claim, not a lawsuit. A line in ink that says we know how. Dad laughed again, louder. You're threatening us? I met his eyes. I'm informing you. This isn't just family drama. I turned for a breath to the lens I imagine. The one that is your face, the one that is anyone who needs to hear it at 2 a.m. This is fraud. Pattern interrupt. The room changed key. Fraud is a big word, my brother muttered. It's the correct word, I said, and it has consequences outside this living room. Mom's hands twisted in her scarf. We didn't mean... Meaning is for poems, Agnes said lightly. Court's like paper. I laid out the timeline. The store card from 2 years ago, the credit dip, the new loan, the branch, the signatures that were not mine. I spoke without rush. I didn't dramatize. I watched the way information settled on their faces. Denial first, then irritation. Then, in my sister's eyes, something like grief. Dad pushed back from the table. The chair legs skidded. You called a bank before you called your father? I called the bank because the bank called me, I said. They did their job. I'm doing mine. What's your job? He snapped. To make us look like criminals. My job, I said, is to protect my future and my name. If that makes you look like something you chose to be, that's between you and your mirror. He took a step toward me. Agnes stepped in without moving. That's her gift. She can occupy space with presence alone. Sit, she said. He did, because some commands are older than bravado. Marjorie answered on the first ring when Agnes called her. Put me on speaker, she said. Her voice filled the room like clear water, I summarized. She didn't gasp. She didn't cluck. She used words like affidavit, identity theft report, damages, mitigation. Dad rolled his eyes at the ceiling, the universal gesture of men who want gravity on their side. Here's what happens next, Marjorie said. Claire continues the fraud process with the bank and credit bureaus. In parallel, she extends you an option. You can cure this without court by signing an acknowledgement, cooperating with the bank, and paying documented costs related to credit repair and any fees incurred. If you refuse, we escalate. But we're giving you a path. A path, Dad echoed. How generous. It is, Marjorie said, because the other path is litigating facts that will be documented on video. He stared at the phone like it had disrespected him. We're not signing anything else. Then you're choosing your venue, Marjorie said. We'll see you there. He hung his head for a second, a crack in the mask. He set his palm flat on the table, the way he used to when I was 6 and afraid of thunder. The gesture wanted to be fatherly. It looked like bracing. Mom reached for my hand. I didn't offer it. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was still. Stillness has edges. She withdrew, flustered, then smoothed her scarf like it could cover a debt. We can fix it, she said quickly. We'll pay the card. We'll call the bank. You'll sign today, I said, acknowledging the fraud and agreeing to cooperate with footage release. Dad barked a laugh. Footage release? You think they're going to hand over tapes to a kid? I think they'll comply with a lawful request, I said, which we know how to make. My sister's voice cut through, quiet but clear. Dad. One word. The room shifted weight. She rarely speaks in these scenes. When she does, the line lands. I saw the couch receipt, she said. You used her email at pickup. His head snapped toward her. Whose side? The side with facts, she said. Her eyes flicked to me. I'm sorry. Somewhere between the ceiling and the floor, Something unclenched. Not forgiveness, not even relief. A hinge. Maybe. A point of motion. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked her. "Because I didn't want to be in it," she said, the honesty of a late hour appearing at noon. And then I was. Agnes slid the acknowledgement across the table. "Sign to confirm what is true," she said, "not to perform, to begin." Dad stared at the paper. He stared at me. He stared at the new locks as if they'd answer for me. "This is humiliating," he said. "Humiliation is a feeling," Agnes answered. "This is a form." He held the pen. His hand hovered. Then, with a jerky flourish that betrayed nothing but himself, he signed. Mom signed, tears making little constellations on the signature block. My brother signed like he was canceling a gym membership. My sister did not sign. She wasn't on the paper. She watched me instead, and there was something in her gaze I hadn't seen in years, respect or resignation or both. I took a breath. It wasn't victory. It was oxygen with texture. "Thank you," I said, "because manners are not a surrender." "Next, you'll call the branch manager and authorize release of footage and any identification copies to the fraud investigator." Dad opened his mouth, closed it. "Fine." The word cost him. He paid with posture. We made the call together, speaker, script, names spelled slowly. Case number repeated, authorization given. Paper trails laid like rails. The manager's voice was professional to the point of bland. It soothed me more than apologies ever could. When we hung up, the house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that arrives after an animal leaves the room. I could hear the refrigerator hum like a steady witness. I turned to you again. The you who's maybe balancing your own phone on your knee right now. If your stomach just flipped with recognition, hear me. You are allowed to move this into the light. You are allowed to call it what it is. You're not cruel for naming harm. You're clear. This isn't just family drama, I said again. Not to the room now, but to whoever needed it most. This is fraud. And when you call something by its right name, it loses a little of its power to rename you, Dad stood. "We're leaving," he said. "We'll be in touch." The ellipsis was the only honest thing in the sentence. "Email," I said, "for record." They left without slamming the door. Progress, in a minor key. Through the peephole, I watched them walk to the car smaller than they'd arrived. My sister looked back and lifted 2 fingers off the handle in a half-wave I filed under to be understood later. Agnes exhaled. It sounded like an old house releasing heat. She didn't hug me. She handed me water. "Sip." I did. The glass was cool. My hands found a tremor they'd postponed. I let it happen in private while the public part of me filed the signed acknowledgement into evidence and wrote the date on the tab. If you've been here, if you've had to tell the truth to people who raised you to swallow it, how did you keep your voice from breaking? Drop your line below. Someone needs your sentence to carry theirs across the room. Morning landed like a clear surface. Nothing on it yet, but you could see every smudge if you weren't careful. I made coffee so strong it tasted like resolve. Agnes slid a legal pad across the table without a word. At the top she'd written, "Case File," Whitcomb, in block letters that looked like a small fortress. We started with the timeline, pens out, dates down. We marked the first theft, the cruise, the coffee shop signatures, the bank call, the acknowledgement they'd signed in our living room. I drew arrows, thin as veins, from evidence to event. Agnes made a column called Costs to Repair. Certified mail fees, notary fees, the hours I'd lose if I had to sit in lines instead of in class. "Courts like numbers," she said. "Let's give them a parade." By 10, Marjorie had texted, "Come by, bring everything." We took the folder that had begun to feel like a spine and drove through a city washed in rain. Her condo smelled like lemon oil and paper. She'd set out tea, highlighters, and those little flags lawyers stick on places that matter. I exhaled for the first time since dawn. This was my grandmother's generation's version of a war room, a dining table, respect for nouns, and hot water. "Walk me through," Marjorie said, clicking a pen. I did. She nodded at beats I didn't know were beats until she marked them. When I finished, she summarized back in 5 sentences that were knives wrapped in velvet. "Good," she said. "Now we build a file that works even if you lose your voice." We made a checklist and named the pieces like we were building a ship. Fraud affidavit, bank. Identity theft report, police. For the record, not the sirens. 3 bureau freeze confirmations. Branch footage request acknowledgments. Prior store card records. Repayment agreement, original. Acknowledgement of fraud signed by parents. Any texts, emails that reveal knowledge or intent. "Don't over-collect," she warned. "Collect enough." She taught me the phrase probative, not punitive. It felt like a coat that fit. Agnes flagged the signature page from the fake loan and lined it up with 3 legitimate documents: my passport application, my university housing form, a check I'd written to the clinic. The differences glowed once you knew where to look, where my line thinned, where theirs swaggered. "We can get a forensic document examiner if we need one," Marjorie said. "But let's see what the bank gives us first." While we worked, my phone buzzed with calls I didn't take. Dad, twice, then unknown, then my brother, then Mom's name, heart emoji next to it from a time I thought hearts could hold everything. I turned the phone face down and kept writing. At noon, we broke for sandwiches, bread with seeds, mustard with bite. The rain softened outside, a whisper on glass. Marjorie pulled up a sample letter and tailored it to me. "You'll send this to the bureaus asking that the trade line linked to the store card be fully investigated and removed if fraudulent," she said. "No, shrill, no story. Fax, attach copies." She glanced over her glasses and breathed between paragraphs. We took turns at her printer. The machine worked like a metronome, paper out, paper stacked. Labels printed with calm black letters. Agnes sealed envelopes with the kind of attention you give to baptism announcements and juror summons, ceremonies that change how names live in the world. My phone buzzed again. A text from my brother. "Dad says we can just pay it. Don't make this bigger." My thumbs hovered. I typed, deleted, typed again. Then I wrote, "This is already big. Payment and cooperation with the investigation are required. Email only." I copied Marjorie. The reply came fast. "You're cold." I didn't answer. Cold is a feeling. The file was a fact. We drove to the notary inside the UPS store where everything smells like cardboard and ink. Claire Whitcomb, sworn and signed. Agnes steadied the forms as I wrote so the letters didn't wobble. The clerk stamped each page with a thud that felt like a heartbeat moving forward. On the way out, I bought a roll of blue tape because it reminded me that even delicate things can be held together if you give them the right edge. Back home, we scanned and saved, named files with dates first so they'd sort themselves even if I forgot how to. 2025-01-12_affidavit, PDF. 2025-01-12_freeze_Equifax, PDF. I backed everything up to 2 drives and a cloud folder only I could see. If you've ever lived through a mess, you know. Redundancy is not paranoia. It's mercy on your future self. By late afternoon, evidence wasn't a pile anymore, it was a structure. We spread it out on the table and traced the path a skeptical stranger's eyes would travel. "What would confuse you?" Marjorie asked. "Oh, what would make you say, 'Show me'?" I pointed to a gap between the store card timeline and the present. "We need receipts," I said. "Or at least statements showing where that money went." "Good," she said. "You'll request itemized statements from the store." She dictated the sentence and I typed. Her voice clipped into the cadence of a seasoned surgeon. Name the cut, make the cut, close the cut. That's when the family panic began to show. Not at our table, on my screen. A flood of messages arrived like a weather alert. From Dad. We talked to a friend who says banks screw up all the time. Don't drag this out. From Mom. Sweetheart, this is hurting all of us. We said sorry. Can we move on? From my sister. I'll testify if it comes to that, but can we try one more conversation first? From an unknown number, a screenshot of a thread I wasn't in, my father calling me dramatic, with a laughing emoji. I felt the heat rise in my face and then fall. They're flailing, I said. The word felt accurate, not cruel. They're trying to shrink the frame. Agnes nodded. We keep ours. Marjorie slid a fresh sheet across the table. Draft a response template now, she said. Use it when you're tired, angry, tempted. She dictated the bones and I gave it skin. For clarity, I will communicate by email. The next steps are listed below. If you wish to help, provide X by Y. If not, refrain from contacting me outside this thread, Sri. The sun made a brief, pale appearance before quitting early. Seattle winter does not overstay. We lit a lamp that made the paper look gold. Agnes took a ruler and aligned each stack until the edges met as neatly as they could. The room grew quiet in the way rooms do when the work shifts from building to believing. Would they dare face court? The question hung like a high wire. I didn't speak it. I let it hum under everything. We rehearsed one more time, not dialogue, procedure. I walked through the file as if a stranger had just asked me, what happened? I told the story in the language of exhibits. I ended with what I needed. Removal of the fraudulent lines, protection of my credit, refunds of any fees, and the rest. Consequences, if necessary. Agnes put a hand over mine. You've done what you can do today, she said. Let the paper do the next part. On the porch, the night had that damp Seattle weight that presses sound down. Somewhere, a siren wailed and then softened. I looked up at the dark and let the feeling come. A sharp, hard pride, not about winning, just about standing where I said I would. Inside, I wrote one last line in my notes app, the place I keep sentences I want to remember when the room tilts. Boundary is not a door slammed. It's a door with a lock and terms. If you've ever had to build a case just to protect your own name, what saved you from spiraling? A checklist? A friend? A song? Drop it below. Someone out there is putting their file together tonight and needs your blueprint. The day of the meeting, Seattle wore a steel-colored sky that made buildings look honest. Agnes ironed my shirt the way she irons important days, slow, sleeves first, as if smoothing a map before a journey. I packed the file like it was a living thing, tabs, dividers, a pen that never blots. Marjorie texted, on time, low heat, high fact. I could almost hear her smile in the punctuation. The elevator to her office hummed like a throat clearing. On the 13th floor, glass swallowed the city in neat rectangles. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, the perfume of decisions. Marjorie stood at the head of the table, hair pinned, legal pad squared. She'd set 3 chairs on one side for us, me, Agnes the file, and 3 on the other. Between them, a carafe of water, 6 glasses, a small bowl of mints no one would touch. Breathe, she said, softer than the room. We're not here to perform. We're here to present, I nodded. Agnes squeezed my forearm, a single precise pulse. The door opened. My parents walked in with my brother behind them, performing casual like a borrowed jacket. Mom's eyes went straight to the windows, then to the carafe, then to me. Dad scanned for power and found none he could pocket. He gave the room a practiced half-smile that once charmed coaches and landlords and family friends who liked a firm handshake. Marjorie offered her hand. Thank you for coming. Phone's on silent, please. We'll keep this focused. They sat. The chairs sighed. The city hummed below, all those stories happening without us. I opened the top tab. Identity theft. Bank loan. The paper felt heavier than it looked. Marjorie began with the spine of our case, 4 sentences that took the air and ordered it. We appreciate your cooperation to date, she said, tone even, including your signed acknowledgement. Today is to finalize a repayment/repair plan and memorialize cooperation with the bank's investigation. If we cannot agree, we'll proceed to the next venue. She didn't say court. She didn't have to. The word existed in the white space. Dad leaned back like leaning could make the table smaller. We already said we'd fix it. And we're here to make fix a document, Marjorie said. Not a mood. I slid the loan packet across. This is the application with the signature that is not mine. Then the credit pull from the store card 2 years earlier. This is the line I didn't open, with late payments I didn't make. I kept my voice level. Agnes had taught me the science of steady. Mom inhaled like she'd stepped into cold water. We were under stress, she began. It was... Stress explains many things, Marjorie said, polite but precise. It does not excuse identity theft. Let's go line by line. We did. Branch logs, timestamps, freeze confirmations, notarized affidavits. The acknowledgement they'd signed at our dining table, their names in the shape they make when truth is louder than habit. When we reached the page labeled Costs to Repair, Dad made a noise halfway between a laugh and a scoff. Notary fees? Postage? You're nickel and diming your own family? I met his eyes. You nickel and dimed my name. Agnes let the silence stand a beat longer than comfort. Silence can be an instrument. Marjorie slid a new document across, crisp and plain. Resolution and cooperation agreement, 3 pages, simple terms. Pay the fraudulent balances. Cooperate with the bank and store to release footage, signatures, and IDs. Reimburse documented costs. No opening new credit in my name. No using my data for any purpose. A clause that said breach equals immediate civil action. Dad tapped the table with his index finger, a rhythm from my childhood that used to mean I'm thinking. Now it meant I'm cornered and building a story. This makes us look like criminals, he said quietly. It makes you look cooperative, Marjorie replied, which is the opposite. Mom's gaze skittered to me. Claire, honey, is this what you want? I wanted to blurt 10 answers. I gave one, yes, because it protects my future. And because it tells the truth, even if no one's in the room to hear it. The door opened again. A man in a navy suit, not flashy, just very sure of its job, stepped in, the branch manager. He nodded to Marjorie, then to us. Thanks for including me, he said. We can clarify a few things. Dad stiffened. The story he was arranging around banks make mistakes felt a little exposed. The manager opened a folio and slid out printouts that were the opposite of dramatic. Timestamps, teller ID numbers, camera zones labeled Z3, Z4, Z7 in sans serif. He spoke in calm sentences. Though we have recorded footage of an individual presenting identification in person at the downtown branch. Security has pulled stills. We're waiting for legal clearance to release the full video to the investigator. The application includes a copy of an ID with the name Claire Whitcomb and a photo that... He paused, choosing care over spectacle. Does not match the person sitting here. He slid a still toward us. The face was blurred. The outline was not mine. The posture was not mine. The necklace on the person's throat was one my mother owns. My breath tripped. Mom's hand went to her neck, reflex before thought. Her fingers met bare skin. Dad's jaw clenched. My brother looked away. Agnes did not move. Marjorie said what I couldn't yet. Thank you, she told the manager. This supports our fraud claim. We'll coordinate for release of the full file to the bank's investigator, pursuant pursuant to the authorization will secure today. She tapped the resolution document with a pen that made a soft, certain sound. Dad's voice sharpened. You're all making a mountain. The manager didn't blink. Sir, this is identity theft. We treat it seriously whether it happens inside a family or not. He stood. I'll leave you to your agreement. He left as cleanly as he came. No gavel, no point scored. Just a fact dropped onto the table like a stone that makes every other stone honest. For a second, nobody spoke. The city moved under us. Sirens somewhere, a bus puffing at a light, a woman's laugh slicing the cold outside the glass. I felt the room tilt back toward level. Marjorie folded her hands. Here's what I propose, she said. You sign the resolution and cooperation agreement today. We set out a repayment calendar with exact amounts and dates, beginning with the store card balance and any fees, plus reimbursement for documented costs to repair Claire's credit. You authorize full cooperation with the bank and the store, including release of footage and any ID presented. If you comply, we stay civil. If you don't, we file. Dad stared at the document, seeing not paper but all the rooms where he'd been the loudest voice. You can't threaten us into signing. No one's threatening, Marjorie said, and there was a feather of steel in it. We're naming options. We're offering the less painful one first. He looked at me. That look he used when I was small, and he wanted me to hand him the answer I'd memorized to keep the peace. Claire. It landed heavy. This is humiliating. Humiliation is not a legal harm, Agnes said mildly. Damage to credit is... I turned to him. I need my name back. I didn't whisper. I didn't plead. I didn't argue law. I named the wound. I need my name back. Marjorie slid a pen across the table. It made that little scritch sound against the wood. On a different day, in a different story, it might have been a sword. Dad didn't reach for it. He stared at his hands like they were handwriting he no longer recognized. Mom spoke into the space, voice small but not childish. We'll sign. He snapped toward her. Elena! She didn't flinch. We'll sign, she repeated, and in that moment she looked more like a person than a role. Exhausted, scared, done. Marjorie nodded once. All right. Before we do, a warning I'm obligated to give. If our review of evidence indicates criminal conduct beyond civil liability, we may be required to refer it to authorities. Signing today does not immunize past acts. It demonstrates good faith. It can matter. Dad's eyes shot sparks. Are you calling us criminals? I'm telling you the law, she said evenly. It's not a personality test. He looked like he might stand up, might push the table, might turn the room into a replay of our front door. He didn't. He sagged a fraction. Rage is heavy. Gravity is undefeated. Marjorie pointed to the signature block. Here. Mom picked up the pen first. Her hand shook, dots of ink like stuttered rain. She signed her name in the place where it belongs, beneath a promise, not over my life. My brother read fast, signed fast, wanted out of the room as if sentences could stain. Dad stared at the line like he could will it to move. Then came the pattern interrupt. Marjorie capped her pen and set it down. We didn't rush. We didn't fill. She let silence bloom, a full 3 seconds that pressed at the edges of the table and then receded like a tide leaving shells. In that pause, the room changed key. Performances wind down when no one applauds. He reached for the pen. He signed. Click. The sound of cap meeting pen. It felt like a door sliding into its frame. We read the payment schedule aloud, not to shame, to solidify. First payment due Friday, certified check, store card records requested today. Cooperation with the bank, immediate, in writing. No new credit attempts with my data. If breached, we file without more meetings. I initialed each page the way you initial along a path so you can find your way back. They initialed. Each mark a small admission that facts exist whether we enjoy them or not. When it was done, I exhaled. Not triumph, relief with edges. My hands trembled a little. Agnes passed water. It tasted like metal and mercy. Dad stood too quickly and knocked his chair back an inch. Pride hates gravity. He caught it, righted it, adjusted a sleeve that didn't need adjusting. He looked at me and I saw it. The smallest bow, barely a nod. The body's concession when the mouth refuses. Not apology, not yet. A crack. Mom pressed her lips together to keep words from spilling. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't answer. Manners would have forgiven what truth was still building. I let the moment be exact. Marjorie gathered the signed copies with the care of a person shelving rare books. Next steps will arrive by email today. Keep your communication to the thread. Claire, you'll forward the bank's updates to me. Agnes, would you like to walk down with me to the clerk's office to file the notice we discussed? Agnes smiled like weather breaking. I would. We rode the elevator down together, my parents half a car length ahead, pretending not to see reflections in the mirrored walls. The lobby smelled like polished stone and damp winter coats. Outside, the sky had lightened a fraction, the city a shade closer to forgiving. We parted on the sidewalk, not touching. They turned left, we turned right. It felt correct the way a level floor feels correct after days of tilt. On the corner, I stopped and looked at the signed pages in my hand. Ink, paper. Names in their lanes. The world didn't cheer. It rarely does. Instead, a bus wheezed. A barista called out a triple oat latte. 2 kids argued about a sticker, and I smiled. Not big. Enough. If you've ever walked out of a room where the truth finally took the chair it deserved, you know the after sound. It isn't loud. It's steady. It's the hum of your own life turning back on. We crossed with the light. Agnes looped her arm through mine. "Lunch?" she asked. "Soup that doesn't need a metaphor?" "Yes," I said, laughing once, a sound I didn't have to earn. Something simple. And as we pushed open the door to the little place on the corner, as the bell chimed and the warmth pressed against our faces, I realized something I want you to hear. Closure isn't a prize a judge hands you. It's a boundary you sign, enforce, and live inside of, one quiet day after the next. The afternoon after the signatures, Seattle turned the color of clean dishes, cloudy, but with a sheen that felt earned. Agnes and I ate soup that tasted like something simple done right. My phone was quiet in a way I didn't know a phone could be. No buzzing panic. No pings dressed as love. Just air and a spoon and the gentle clink of a ceramic bowl on wood. Closure doesn't show up with a parade. It arrives like this, a to-do list that finally shrinks. A breath that doesn't snag. A night where you sleep because the door is locked and the paperwork is filed and your name sits where it belongs. Under your own hand, we walked home slow. Agnes tucked her scarf tight and counted steps for exercise and for rhythm. At the mailbox, I pulled out envelopes that used to make my stomach drop. Bank logos, a windowed square with an official strip of barcode. But this time, I held them steady. I knew what lived inside. Confirmations, not threats. A file doing its job while I did mine. Back in the kitchen, I spread the mail flat and read. The bank confirmed the fraud case had advanced to full investigation. The store replied with a promise of itemized records. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, freezes in place, alerts set. Each letter was tone neutral, almost boring. You know how relief sounds? Bureaucratic. Agnes poured tea. "You look taller," she said. "I feel returned," I said. Not fixed, not perfect. Just back in my own outline. That evening, I opened my student portal and paid the spring tuition with money that used to feel like a rumor. The number rolled across the screen, and I didn't flinch. I forwarded receipts to Marjorie, filed PDFs, renamed them like I'd promised myself. Dates first, nouns next, verbs last. Then I backed up the backups. If you've ever rebuilt something people took without asking, you understand. Redundancy is not fear. It's respect for the work. My parents didn't call. My brother sent a thumbs up emoji I didn't understand and didn't chase. My sister emailed 2 lines. I'm sorry for what I saw and didn't say. I'll cooperate. I replied, thank you. Email is the right place. It wasn't warmth. It was a bridge with guardrails. Sometimes that's sweeter. The next days were made of small, honest things. I went to class. I sat by the window because light helps. The professor talked about professional ethics, and I wrote 3 extra pages without meaning to. You learn quickly how fragile reputation is when you've watched it bend under someone else's name. Maybe that's the lesson I didn't want but won't return. You guard the thing that lets you be yourself in public. At home, Agnes and I invented new rituals. We did 2 truths and a task at breakfast. 2 facts about the day ahead, 1 action to move the file or my life forward. We walked after dinner, not far, just enough to remind our legs they were for more than standing still in living rooms that felt like courtrooms. On Sundays, we made a stew that could survive being ignored while we read. Healing tastes like something that improves when you don't monitor it every second. And yes, I thought about my parents a lot. Grief kept odd hours. It knocked during commercials and in checkout lines, and in the aisle with the cheap candles where scent tries to sell memory. I let it in and let it out. I didn't invite it to stay. That's different. You get a say now. If you needed to hear that today, hear it twice. You get a say. One morning, the bank investigator called. Calm voice, clear questions. Thank you for your documentation, she said. It's precise. That word sat warm in my chest. Precise is not flashy. Precise is what keeps you. We reviewed the timeline, confirmed the freezes, discussed the footage process. She didn't promise what she couldn't deliver. She didn't ask me to perform pain for the record. She logged facts and thanked me for clarity. I hung up feeling seen by a system I'd been told all my life to fear or flatter. Sometimes the system is a person doing their actual job on a Tuesday. In the afternoon, I found the first sign of real repair where I didn't expect it, in the mirror, brushing my teeth. My jaw wasn't set like a guard anymore. My shoulders had stopped hugging my ears. I looked like someone I might make plans with. Agnes knocked on the door frame with her knuckle, the way she does to respect thresholds. Walk? We took the long route to the library and returned a book about boundaries that didn't tell me anything new except this. Most of the work is keeping your own rules, when it would be easier to bend them for someone else's comfort. What a quiet revolution, Agnes said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. Keeping a promise to yourself in a small room. Later that week, we received the still image from the branch in a password-protected link. Blurred face, clear necklace. That ache flared. The old reflex to explain, to excuse, to swallow, it passed. I sent the link to Marjorie. She filed it with 3 words. Received, strengthens claim. Professional English for you're not crazy. Sometimes that's all a heart wants from language. You might be wondering if I forgave them. That's not the verb I'm using right now. I'm using protect. I'm using restore. I'm using teach. Forgiveness might come dressed as time and distance and new holidays shaped to fit people who show up with empty hands and open eyes, or it might not. Either way, I'm not on their timetable anymore. That's the miracle I didn't know to ask for. My calendar, back under my name. Career-wise, the thing I feared most, being the girl with the asterisk next to her credit check, didn't happen. The internship coordinator wrote, "We'll run our screen at the end of March. Your fraud case is documented. You've done everything right." Doing everything right doesn't guarantee a result. It guarantees you don't hand someone else a reason to shrink you. I saved that email in 3 places and let my lungs remember what full felt like. One evening, I sat down to write this for you because I know some of you aren't watching for entertainment. You're watching for language. You need a sentence you can borrow when your mouth won't make one. Here it is. I'm moving this into the light. Say it to a banker. Say it to a cousin. Say it to a mirror. Light isn't loud. It's consistent. What did closure look like in the end? Not fireworks, paperwork, not a grand apology monologue. A signed plan followed. The first payment landed exactly when it should. The second arrived by certified mail, cashier's check inside, a silence where excuses used to live. My credit report updated, one small correction at a time, like a beach rebuilding after stormwater chooses another road. I didn't frame the letters. I filed them and went to class. Progress doesn't demand attention. It asks for attendance. On the last night of the month, I stood in the doorway of the room where this started. The dining table was clean. The evidence folder had thinned to a sleepable thickness. Agnes sat with a book of short stories and glasses low on her nose. She looked up and saw my face do something new. "You're smiling like you trust it," she said. "I do," I said, and the truth of that sentence startled me a little. We put on music that didn't ask anything of us. I chopped vegetables. She stirred. Steam fogged the window in loose ovals. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's wind chime made a choice between cold and charm. I thought about the first night, the leftovers, the note, the empty house, and then I thought about this one, the full kitchen, the signed papers, the ordinary. Closure isn't an ending. It's a home where ordinary fits again. Before bed, I wrote the line you may need more than any other. A boundary is a way I love myself in public. I learned it the hardest way I've ever learned anything, but I learned it, and I'm leaving it here for you to pick up if you want it. If you've made it this far, you might be holding a story like mine, or you love someone who is. You might be whispering, "Is it too late to name it?" It isn't. You can start with an affidavit and a file name. You can start with a lock and a list. You can start with a dinner you eat at a table that no longer hosts excuses. Start small, start exact, start now. And if you're the person who crossed a line, who signed over someone else's life because panic felt like a plan, this part is for you. Repair is a verb you do in daylight. Apologies help. Paper helps more. You can start with the thing you don't want to sign, then sign it. Then show up on the days no one films. That's how trust sprouts in soil it didn't choose. We cleaned the kitchen. We turned off the lamp. The house held its quiet like a promise kept. In the doorway to my room, Agnes kissed her fingers and tapped the door frame, an old habit from her mother, a blessing for thresholds. "Sleep," she said. "Your name is safe here." It was. It is. If you have ever had to draw a hard line with people you're supposed to be soft for, I see you. If you're drafting your first letter tonight, borrow the words if you need them. If you're further along, leave yours below. Someone new is scrolling the comments with wet eyes and shaking hands, looking for the permission you've already given yourself. What boundaries have you set for yourself? What did they save? What did they cost? Tell me. Tell us. Somebody out there is choosing daylight and needs your sentence to walk across.